Hello, you're listening to Abstract AF. I'm Sneha Jaiswal, and in this episode, we're going to talk about what makes the 2002 Hollywood film The Ring scarier than most horror films that come out today. This is not to say that The Ring is one of the best horror films to be ever made, but it's just that some of the horror films that have been coming out recently have been so disappointing that The Ring does look great in comparison. The film is based on the 1991 Japanese novel called Ringu, written by Tokyo-based author Koji Suzuki. It first came out as a Japanese film in 1998, which was a huge box office success in Japan, leading to the Hollywood remake a few years later. So what makes this old film's horror factor so enduring even years later? Well, the easiest way to explain it is that most horror films are just too terrible. I'm going to list 5 other reasons to explain The Ring's popularity. The first reason I can think of is the fact that it has an urban legend at the core of the story. It's a fact that is revealed in the trailer itself. One of the characters talk about how there is a videotape doing the rounds with weird sequences, and if anybody watches it, they're going to get a call informing them that they are going to die in 7 days.
Someone knows you've watched it. And what they say is, you will die in 7 days. And exactly 7 days later. Who told you that?
Horror films with plots that sound like sinister urban legends are so much more fascinating because they seem like it could happen to anybody, which is what made the 2015 horror film It Follows such a hit with most critics. In It Follows, there is a demon that follows you and haunts you till you die. It's like you're cursed. But you can pass on the curse by having consensual sex with somebody, and the demon will begin haunting them instead. It's like STDs, sexually transmitted demon stalker.
Somebody gave it to me, and I passed it to you. Wherever you are, it's somewhere walking straight for you.
So in The Ring, you watch a tape and you eventually die. In It Follows, you have sex with someone and you eventually die. On paper, It Follows definitely sounds scarier than The Ring, but I think The Ring was a far better film. I saw It Follows with 3 other friends. One of them fell asleep while watching it, and the rest of us were extremely disappointed. Because critics had been hailing the film as one of the best horror films to come out in the decade, and it just didn't seem like it. I guess what made It Follow so much easier for American viewers is the fact that they are so much more sexually liberated, and this film is like a metaphorical representation of AIDS. In fact, that's what a lot of American reviewers did mention in their reviews, that this film is like a warning to promiscuous teenagers. So it all comes down to the relatability factor. Accidentally watching something sinister on the television versus having consensual sex with somebody who might be haunted by a demon? Well, I think accidentally watching something weird on the television wins. Now that I've digressed so much, let's get back to The Ring. The second reason that makes this 2002 film scary is the fact that it doesn't tap into the usual trope of a haunted house in the middle of nowhere. The victims of the tape live in bustling areas, surrounded by people, and yet manage to die. And that is something that's very terrifying. I remember there was a brilliant shot in the film where the main protagonist starts to get scared over things that are happening around her, and the camera pans out to show the building that she lives in, which is a huge residential block with thousands of flats. She's basically surrounded by hundreds of families that coexist in the same place, and it made it so much eerier. I mean, the urban desolation of a packed society is just something else. I recently saw the 2019 horror film Eli. It's about a boy who suffers from an inexplainable disease. So his parents take him to a medical facility which looks like a medieval mansion, which is located in a remote area where nothing else seems to exist. Just a very obvious haunted large house in a village setting was enough to make the film not scary, especially because it's supposed to be a medical facility. So why is it in such a weird place? If you want to make horror films scary, you need to make people believe that things can go wrong anywhere. And that's what works in the favor of The Ring. Reason number 3 is creepy kids. This is actually a standard horror trope that you will see in many films. Get a creepy, sad-looking kid, make them do weird stuff, and that's enough for some of us to freak out. It's what made the Sinister films such a hit with horror fans. The first Sinister film came out in 2012, 10 years after The Ring, but it's nothing like The Ring except for the fact that Ring has 2 creepy children, Sinister has a whole bunch of them. And despite the fact that Sinister doesn't have great ratings on the internet, it's a really good horror film. I think my friend and I especially enjoyed watching Sinister 2, which has even worse ratings, but was definitely creepy as hell. It's probably the fact that the plot of Sinister is so uncomfortable that it makes people give it unfavorable reviews. Because children are supposed to be nice, sweet, adorable little things. But after watching Sinister, you would wish you never have a child. Moving on to reason number 4 that makes The Ring a great watch is the fact that it actually has a plot. There are obviously some loopholes in the story. The most basic question a viewer might think of is, who is making that call after somebody watches the tape? Anyway, loopholes aside, the film has a solid start. It has a clear protagonist who, instead of running off to the church to get a priest to ward off evil spirit, treats the tape like a mystery and tries to investigate its origins. So she does research and pieces bits and scraps of evidence that can lead her to the source of the tape for her to better understand why weird things are happening and how she can stop the deaths. Most horror films do not bother to explain the origins of their demons or ghosts, but in The Ring, we get a pretty good idea of what is going on by the end. This is why the film Conjuring was such a hit. The makers give us a backstory to the malevolent spirit's terrifying innocence, and you have paranormal investigators who try to crack the case by finding out more about the place where eerie things are happening and who the previous inhabitants are.
What are you guys?
Well, we've been called ghost hunters, paranormal researchers.
But we prefer to be known simply as Ed and Lorraine.
Moving on to reason number 5. I can actually think of a few more reasons that make The Ring a good scary film, but the winning point has to be the content of the tape in the film. Like I said at the beginning, in the film, people watch a tape and they die in 7 days. That video is very eerie. It's black and white, has a lot of static noise that's unsettling. In fact, everything about the video is a little unsettling. Not something you would want to see in your nightmares. So the most crucial bit in the horror film, the tape, it manages to creep you out. I'm going to add a bonus reason, and that's dying animals. The evil spirit in The Ring doesn't just drive human beings insane and to their eventual deaths, but even animals aren't spared the psychological trauma of being around a negative presence. So yeah, The Ring baddie is a real baddie, and horror makers should start taking some notes. That's all for this episode. Talk to you in the next one.